Okay, so yesterday you looked at Rome's transformation geographically as it transitioned from a republic to an empire. So aim 5.4B, which should be in your notebooks already. How did Rome transform politically as it transitioned from an empire from a republic to an empire? So that's what we're going to take a look at today. We just reviewed all of your responses to the do now question. So off we go. Okay, political changes. So we'll give you a second here. Okay, so there's an old saying, and it goes, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So as Rome is continuing to become more powerful now that they've conquered Carthage, that power starts to corrupt kind of those in positions of government. So corruption in the Senate is increasing as a result. This leads to instability and kind of chaos in Roman society to a certain extent. And this is an important point that I'm going to kind of touch on right now. And this is a recurring theme throughout history. You will see it throughout Global One. You will see it throughout Global Two. You will see it throughout U.S. history, etc. During times of chaos and instability, people are happy to hand over absolute power to a single all-powerful ruler who can restore order and bring stability to society. And that is generally true. So we usually think of absolute government as kind of this scary thing, when in reality, absolute government is a circumstance that people will often ask for in response to a chaotic and unstable environment. So as corruption in the Senate is increasing, the Roman Senate is kind of in shambles. Chaos and instability reign. People turn to a single all-powerful ruler to kind of bring that stability back to society. So they do that in the form of an emperor. The government looks to an emperor for the answer to Rome's increasing problems. One of the things about absolute government is that an absolute ruler can make changes very quickly and efficiently. It's very nimble, it's a very agile form of government where things happen in an instant, okay? Because there's not a coalition of people that have to kind of make these decisions together. One person can just make a decision and then execute the changes that need to be executed, right? So that's kind of what happens. So the other important connection here is that the word emperor, okay? If you're ever wondering about how an empire is governed, empires are run by emperors, okay? So that's the important thing to kind of understand. Empires are run by emperors, okay? That's an easy way to remember it. Okay, so now we got some vocab we got to take a look at. So in Rome, once they adopt an emperor, although one person has a lot of the power, there are still other government positions that need to be filled to assist with the kind of the governance of the land. And that form of government that will be installed underneath the emperor is an aristocracy. In this aristocracy, it is basically the wealthy, high class nobility, landowners, that fill these government positions. So these are people of privilege that are filling in government positions underneath the emperor. Okay, so next is the word instability. While you write, I'm trying to kind of accelerate this process here. I think instability is a word that we use, but we don't always necessarily know how to define it. Instability is essentially a lack of stability. Now, I know it doesn't help to, use the word stability to define instability, but that's kind of a given. But instability can be caused by a lot of different factors: corruption, poor leadership, lack of communication between ruler and subject. A lot of things. During times of instability, the government may be close to collapsing. In an unstable government or an unstable government will kind of lack the ability to effectively control the population and and lend kind of order to society. So this is a disorder in society and chaos are kind of characteristic of an unstable government or the condition of instability. All right, I'm going to move on. So next vocab word is dictator. Now, dictator is another word that I think we've all used before in some capacity, but I don't know if we necessarily know how to define it if we had to. So dictator is a ruler with total power over a country. Most times, this is a person who has gained power by force. Now, even though the emperor of Rome will the people will ask for this all-powerful ruler, there still is some competition at the top for who this is going to be. So there is still this element of this person kind of gaining power by force to a certain extent. Adolf Hitler is kind of another example. He's a famous dictator, and his rise to the top is through a mixture of diplomacy and force. Is the simplest way to describe it. Now, as we move forward in the course, we will eventually discuss, how Adolf Hitler comes to power. But Adolf Hitler is someone who we would certainly categorize as a dictator, a single person with total power over all aspects of a country. It's synonymous with absolute ruler. Okay, a dictator is also an absolute ruler, typically. And then we come to emperor. Emperor are the rulers of empires. Okay, we went over that. An emperor is also an absolute ruler. Now, one is not always the same as the other. An emperor, like we said, is in control of an empire. And if something's considered an empire, it has conquered foreign territories, right? So not every dictator is an emperor, but almost all emperors are dictators, which is kind of a tricky kind of thing, right? So they are another form of absolute ruler, and they rule over the empire. In ancient Rome, emperors choose their successors. So they name the person who's going to rule after them. So this is not always necessarily a bloodline thing, like a dynasty, although oftentimes it is. But if that emperor decides it is their will, they can choose someone who is not related to them to succeed them as emperor. So emperors rule over empires. And last slide here. Caesar. Now, Caesar is a word that I'm sure some of you have heard before, but Caesar is eventually going to be the title that is given to a Roman emperor. It's the same thing. The title of Caesar comes from Rome's first dictator, kind of, sort of, Julius Caesar. So his namesake kind of becomes a title. The word Caesar is a word that is borrowed and used across the world. So like the dictator of Russia, for example, will be called Tsar, Czar, which is kind of just kind of their Russian version of the word Caesar. So you can see kind of the similarity and the influence between them. In Germany, the kind of dictator of Germany will be called Kaiser, which is like the German version of the word Caesar. So you can see the influence here. This is really hard to do, by the way. Man, that looks terrible. Awesome. Kaiser and Caesar. Looks like my 4-year-old wrote that lefty. But regardless, you can see how this title has been borrowed and used in other parts of the world. But the general idea is the Caesar is the title given to the emperor of Rome. So just so you're aware, as we go through the classwork, they will make reference to Caesar. They will make reference to the word dictator. So I wanted to make sure that we had all of these definitions as we move on with the classwork for today.